Mr. Birdie, members of the board, we do have several items for board discussion this evening. Our first item is an FCSD COVID-19 update. And you will see on the screens up here, in addition to packets in your folder, I will start this discussion by saying Mr. Crapo and I will do a presentation. I will cover the local data. He will cover some additional data. And we will present it in a way with hopes that the board could have meaningful discussion afterwards. So I will not read a lot of numbers to you, as you can see the numbers for yourselves. What I would like to do is just point out some things if you can compare. We'll go back to September 8th through September 15th with the dashboard. And then we'll fast forward 3 weeks this time instead of 2, September 29th through October 6th. Quarantines for students overall dropped from 182 to 156. Positive tests for students dropped from 59 to 46. Staff quarantines went from 1 to 3 in that 3-week period, and then the staff positives went from 9 to 8. So one interesting thing to note there about that data is that the data does fluctuate. If you follow it regularly, you will see that it goes up and down. I know that during this 3-week period, there was one 5-day window where our number of students quarantined was down to under 100. Now, obviously, the last 5 days, 5 school days, 29th through the 6th, it's back up to 156. Which again is lower than it was 3 weeks ago. But again, my point is that it will go up and down, and you'll notice that if you check in regularly. Next, I'd like to continue. Now we'll go to the numbers by building. And again, we're looking at that September 8th to September 15th window, and then the latest is September 29th through October 6th. Just a few notables here. The high school quarantines, again talking about students, went from 59 to 29, and positive tests in that building went from 27 to 13. Creekside, on the other hand, went from 33 quarantines to 40, but positive tests went from 11 to 4. Crossroads quarantines went down from 22 to 13, but again, positive tests went up from 5 to 11. And again, we're talking about student data here. If you look at Compass, their quarantines went from 4 to 18, so you saw a jump there. And South quarantines went down from 18 to 9. So again, those are some of the ones, if you sit and actually compare by building, those are some of the ones that would get your attention. And now we'll move on to the absence data. Again, you're able to see this side by side, September 9th through September 16th. And September 29th through October 6th. To me, I'll point out 2 buildings, Central and West. So the absence rate at Central went from 5.72% to 7.84%, so that's plus 2.12%. Their COVID absences went from 74 to 111. On the flip side, West Elementary went from 10.05% to 7.72%, which is a decrease of 2.33%. And their COVID absences went from 107 to 44. Interesting, again, I can't offer you an explanation, but if you look at FHS, their absence percentage is down almost 2%, but they show a very small increase in the number of COVID absences. So I think initially you look at something like this, and it's true most of the time that you'll see a correlation there, but every once in a while you'll see something that gets your attention like, well, that's off a little bit. But I think, again, if you watch the data consistently, you will see some of those things over time. And then the last slide that I have for you this evening is the Butler County School District's data. You're looking at week of September 7th and also week of September 27th. Again, this data is supplied to me by a third party. And in fact, Mr. Birding found an error earlier this week and shared it with them, and they made the appropriate correction. The only thing that I'll point out on this slide is our own data. If you look at the staff positives, went from 13 to 6. Staff quarantine was the same, 2 and 2. Student positive went from 49 to 42, and students quarantined 162 to 117. So that concludes my portion of the presentation this evening. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Members of the board, I tried to pull data that would show where we are in the last month is what I was trying to focus on. In an effort, I was looking at ODH. I was also looking at the Miami site, which was down today. And I do try to wait until as late as possible to try to get the most accurate data before this meeting. And in doing so, the latest epidemiology report that I had access to was the 30th, due to September 30th. So on the first slide is from ODH. It is from September 6th to October 6th. The second slide is from the epidemiology report. At the very top, that report is a PDF given, so the date range begins in March through the current. And then the final one is the cases by zip code. Again, focusing on the 3 zip codes. 1-1, they were down 37.4%. 1-4, down 5.8%. And 1-5, which is down 41%. And that's our local data. The last one from the epidemiology report is the hospitalization rate. On that particular report, I can't get it to break down by age groups like I was able to do on the Miami site. So again, it's a PDF. I don't have age group data.
Okay, any questions from the board?
I have a question. I'm trying to put your first, well, it's not the first slide. It's the positive cases in Butler County, September 6th through October 6th. I'm looking at your slide, and so the daily cases trend, it said, okay, all righty, I got it. So are we down to 0 as of October, is that October 6th?
My guess, and this is an assumption, is in the gray area
Okay.
would be a window of, I don't know how long it takes to get tests back or whatnot, but typically the closer you get to the current time, they say it could fluctuate.
Okay, I'm just trying to, so the positive cases, yeah, okay. So with the positive cases overlaid with the hospitalizations of Butler County, they're going in opposite directions. And I'm just trying to make sure that I fully understand that. I guess it's just for the people who are positive, yeah, those two charts they don't
Again,
fully.
that one came from the PDF from the epidemiology report, so that report doesn't break down age groups for me.
Okay.
And I couldn't get on the Miami site, it was down, so.
So, and this chart comes from where again?
ODH.
This is ODH. Okay.
So if I may, Mr. Shorter, I don't know this for fact, but I'm sort of leaping to an assumption that the first graph that you see as a line chart is new cases. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then
Those are positive cases.
positive, new positive cases, correct?
So in the drop down, you can choose, this is the positive cases, so.
But I mean, are they
Doesn't say
new,
positive, no, it says positive,
just as positive?
yes.
Okay. I'm assuming it's new. And then I think the bar chart is the number of people that are currently in the hospital with COVID. So,
So that's dramatically increased.
well,
given
it
the
increased by
trend.
6 in that 1 week. So it actually went to the hospital. Maybe they tested positive the week before, they're in the hospital now. I'm just throwing it out, I don't know, I'm just saying that could be explanation for the data difference. So 6 more people are now in the hospital in the week of the 19th through the 25th, and we're in the 12th to 18th.
Right, I'm looking from 9/5 to 9/19.
And there's 27 more people, correct? In the hospital.
Yeah, it's just the chart from ODH.
If I might add, what I've heard is that the hospitalization's a lagging indicator.
Right.
So you have your
that's
new cases, and then the hospitalizations are several weeks after that. So it's a lagging indicator.
Right, but then you would see that, I think, if you're looking at the data from the hospitalizations from 8/15 to probably 9/12. It's probably just in the ODH data. I'll take a look at it myself as well. I think it just gives an impression there.
And may I add something? If the board would like to give some guidance to district administrators in terms, if there's a specific site that you would like for us to pull this data from, we are happy to do it. So
Yeah.
this is not created by us, we're simply pulling it. I know there was an issue with the last site, but again, I would ask you to consider giving us some guidance where you would like that data to be pulled from so that we could meet your needs as you prepare for discussions.
Right, and I would just put the source, like, on the data, so that we know where that comes from. And I think I mentioned at the last meeting, the Butler County, for consistency, so that we're, just looking at some consistent data, because I was thinking this came from the Miami portal again.
Nothing came from Miami.
Okay, yeah, so I would say the Butler County data, maybe,
So
because
if
I
you go on
get,
the Butler County website, it kicks you to ODH. And in
Yes.
ODH, if you just want a 1-month data trend, sometimes it's hard to get a nice looking line. It's spiky. That's a word.
okay,
So,
okay, no problem.
So, again, before we leave here this evening, I'd like a if you want ODH, we are happy to give you ODH. But this is ODH, right?
yes. ODH and then the epidemiology report.
Okay, and I do have a slide from ODH, so I do mix the data a little bit. I just didn't quite follow the trend between the data listed here and the hospitalizations. So, and I didn't see a site listed on the data, so I wasn't sure. I was checking as to where the source was. Thank you.
If I may. Adding the source is a good idea, and I think the consistency that coming from the same site, no matter what, it shows that we're not just bouncing around, grabbing information from different sites. So the consistency, I applaud you for that, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crapo.
Any other questions for Mr. Crapo or Mr. Smith at this time?
I do have a question about the absence data. So the total absence percentage, we're talking, that's just the total number of students that were out that week?
Correct. Total absence percentage, I'm guessing that it's, the number of students by the total number of days. Yes, correct.
Okay. And when we count COVID absences, is that positives plus quarantines, or is it positives plus quarantines plus, I don't know if my kid has COVID, they're getting tested today?
I know that it's positives plus quarantines. I don't know that if they, and Mr. Crapo, you might know I don't know that if they put question marks into that category, I
It's
don't know.
COVID related, then it is, it's marked as COVID related.
Is that from the parents calling in or communicating it's
Yes.
COVID, we're getting tested, but we're
Yes.
not sure, then it gets reported
That's
that way?
coming from the parents.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions?
I think if I could, if you, Mr. Crapo, if you could just kind of go into the reporting. I know we had some conversation about that at the last meeting, and then you followed up. Mr. Smith, thank you so much. Can you just go through that so that we can get the clarification as to our reporting, our data, as far as masks and quarantines, how those are actually reported, just so that the public has confidence and,
So when we're notified of a positive, then the building will do a trace of the classrooms, the bell schedules, the seating charts, the cafeteria, the bus. I mean, all of that is being traced. It's either the nurse or the AP or the principal, whoever in that building is in charge of this data, will compile the list. It's called a line list. And on that line list, it's every single person that has either been in contact or is the case. It goes on that line list. From that line list, then they start looking into who was wearing a mask and who has been vaccinated. That goes on to another spreadsheet, which is the numbers spreadsheet. I turn in to the health department the line list, and they do their tracing with that data. It's got the name, the email address, and 30 columns. And then every day, I'm emailed at the end of the day the numbers page from the buildings, and then I update that the next day because some buildings will email it to me at 6 o'clock at night and so forth. So the numbers page gets up, like today's numbers page will be updated on the website tomorrow.
okay. And so, one of the things that I heard bandied about by a couple of parents was whether or not actually having a list where you identify the students that are wearing their mask, like a little check-in. I don't know if that is something that we need, but I just want to have assurance, and I want the public to have assurance that we are able to clearly delineate and identify the students accurately that are wearing masks.
All I can say is that the building administration and the nurses worked with the teachers and the staff to identify who was wearing a mask.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions?
Excuse me, I don't think that's, and I'm not sure if that was a question or just a comment, Ms. Shorter, so I apologize. I think we're walking on thin ice if we're asking teachers to tell kids to put masks on or wear it properly if it's not mandated. If they're wearing it, they're wearing it. I don't think we need to track that. Is that what you're asking, or am I misunderstood?
Yeah, I'm asking if they're just wearing it. Like, is there a little check-in? Like, is there some little designation that's done? I'm just still concerned as to how people keep that particular data, you know, in mind every day as classes are changing in and out. You know, if you had some little sign-in sheet, and this is just feedback from parents that I've gotten, just a way to track it. I'm not talking about the way that they're wearing their mask. I'm talking about if they're wearing their mask, period. Yeah.
I don't think that's a good idea.
So I'm just giving feedback
I understand.
based on what
what I'm
parents
doing, too.
have emailed. So I'm not trying to ask for a board policy, just giving feedback.
If I could just share a perspective. You know, there's no 100% guarantee on, you know, some staff members knowing, but, and I don't even know if I worded that correctly, but here's what I think we should consider. Most teachers, as crazy as this sounds, they know their kids, even the ones who have 120, 130 students in their classroom over a 6-period day. By this time of the year, they generally know if students are wearing a mask or not,
On a
just
regular
because
basis,
they
right.
see them. you know what I'm saying? Now,
Yeah.
does that mean it's 100%? Absolutely not. Are there times when Jimmy normally wears a mask? But the reality is that most students either wear it or they don't, and I think that really helps. Are there some kids who wear it one day and then don't the next? I'm sure there are some, but most of them, whatever they're doing today, they will probably do the next day and the next day, if that makes, and I think that helps our tracers, because then they go to staff and staff says, oh yeah, he wears a mask every day. Yeah, or they might say, he wears it most of the time, and you know, let me think about that particular day, and they might have to do some additional research. But most of the kids will do the same thing every day, and I think that helps with the tracing.
And I think that's important to say, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Smith, I'm glad that you said that, because I think parents want to hear that.
Yeah.
Based on the feedback that, you know, that I've gotten. That
Right.
is a concern, so
Sure.
I'm just sharing that
Yeah.
with the, with the board, and hearing you say that, you know, that the teachers at this point have a comfort level. They recognize the kids who are wearing their mask on a regular basis, and so it's not so much of an issue.
Correct.
So for those parents that are concerned about it, because there are some, that is good information
Yeah.
to publicly put out there and share, because that's a perspective.
Right.
That's important.
Yeah.
And I think it would give them, and myself as well, some peace of mind.
Yeah.
That there is comfortability established and a routine, so that feeds into
Right.
the report.
If it was 5 weeks ago, you know, and we were just a couple weeks into the year, it's different. And it really is amazing when you think about it. It takes some time, but our staff members truly get to know the kids. It's like a routine. They see them every day at the same time. And so they know which ones generally wear masks. So, and again, I think we're about 7 weeks in, so that's enough time where they've been together long enough where that helps out tremendously with the tracing.
I agree, and one of the things that I meant to ask about, and whether or not we were tracking it, as it pertains to substitutes, do we have any information on that? Another concern that was shared by a parent was whether or not we were running into any difficulty getting substitutes.
Substitute teachers in general
Right now.
to work.
Exactly.
Yeah, it continues to be an issue. I know it's an issue, and it hasn't stopped being an issue. And it was, I think, it's been an issue for quite some time, maybe even pre-COVID, but I'll let Mr. Martin speak to that as he works directly with HR and.
It is an issue, Mrs. Shorter, and it's worse this year than it has been in the past, and it's been bad in the past. And it's not just in Fairfield, it's pretty much in every district. Even those who have substantially raised pay for substitute teachers, they're having this very similar shortage that we are, so.
I read about Springboro specifically, and I did wonder about that because I did receive some questions about that as it pertained to substitutes and, you know, getting them in at this particular time. So thank you for
Yes.
shedding some light on that. I appreciate it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Just a shameless plug, if anybody out there would like to substitute teach at our district, please contact our district office. Thank you very much.
And that number is 829-6300. How about that? I knew that.
Good segue.
As far as, Mr. Smith, you asked what data I'm interested in, and I'd like to have the conversation about that. I am comfortable, and I want the rest of the board also let everyone know where you stand. I am comfortable receiving our district numbers as far as students quarantined, students positive, staff quarantined and positive. I've been sort of doing my homework as far as the other items. it's not really affecting my decision-making. But I want to see what our district is doing as far as numbers and quarantines and the rate they're going. For my own enjoyment, I'm also tracking the other districts and comparing who has mask mandates and who does not, and what their numbers are doing. And it actually seems like our numbers are doing similar things as those other districts. And, you know, since we can't really break down the hospitalizations by age group, I'm not sure that I'm interested to keep receiving that on a meeting-by-meeting basis. Unless we see a big spike, I would like to be updated on that. And if a big spike in student-aged. So if that information is available, I would like that. The cases by zip code, that's nice to keep getting, but again, I would like, my main focus is right now, I see that our numbers have been maintaining or slightly declining, and I would like to just continue the updates that you give us via email. You know, if other board members have other ideas, I'm open to that as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, so are you saying that you only want to see the district data? Or if you could clarify?
I don't think at this point that we need to ask Mr. Crapo to go into a big presentation as far as, you know, we didn't see it tonight, he went into like deaths, there were deaths, and we're not having any. We don't have students, we don't know if their students are being hospitalized. To me, since we keep seeing Fairfield's trend of maintaining or slightly going down, and I'm also seeing that when we get the updates from the Butler County Educational Service Center, that those numbers are also going down or maintaining. I don't know that we need a whole lot of time spent on getting all of this other kind of data that may or may not reflect on what other people want to hear. And so I'm putting it out there that if the majority of the board doesn't necessarily need all that data, are we going to have our staff keep chasing that data? And that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to lay down what definitely this district should or should not do.
Yeah.
Is that?
It makes sense, but I just want to make it clear that I don't recall the board asking him to provide the ODH data or the Miami data. I mean, I certainly didn't. The data that I'm interested in is the trend line and the comparisons to other districts. Now, I may look at ODH data, I certainly will, that's in my purview to do so, but I don't recall actually
No,
asking him to.
Right, and
To do that.
and that's what I think we're agreeing on that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, Mr. Crapo's been going beyond what the board has been asking, and
He has.
I think there's a lot of things that he should be doing in the district, and for him to keep going beyond what we're asking for, maybe we can relieve him of some of that chasing of data and making presentations that he could be doing other things and helping the rest of the staff. That's all I'm saying. I'm not
Sure.
trying to.
Yeah, I'm just, the
Okay.
only, because I think what happens is, you know, we all have different ideas about how data should be presented, and
Sure.
then we get into this, like, well, I'm picky about it, I like
Right.
to see things like, you know, and I think that's something that definitely isn't necessary.
Right.
I think that actually adds to
Sure.
some of the, you know,
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
You know, my statement, and I think it's a clarifying statement, is just that. And I've always said, what are our numbers? Because that seems to be the one thing we can agree on. Every time we talk about other data, it ends up being a point of concern or contention for the board. So I'm focused on our data because that's what matters right here and how we're doing. And it continues to look steady right now, so.
yeah, I'm interested in our data and districts around us, because I think we can't just look at our data in a silo, but in our neighboring, you know, our
Right.
neighboring districts. And he doesn't have to necessarily go off and put that together. I mean, I'm looking at that too. This is
Right.
good. I like
Right.
the absence data. I think that's really,
Sure.
really compelling. You know,
good.
I would like to know whether or not we are having any impacts with substitutes. That is something I'm concerned about, but I'm not asking for that to be tracked. You know, I can follow it with an email and get that from Mr. Smith. So I don't want to burden Mr. Crapo, and it just
Right.
seems unfair.
Okay.
You know, because I'm going to be picky. That's how I am.
Yeah,
when it
that's
comes to
great.
data. I'm sorry, I'm not. It is nothing personal. It's just the way that I'm used to seeing data,
Sure.
and then it always leads to
Right.
questions. So
Okay,
our own data and just
how it
keep up
compares,
with the
yeah.
absences and how it compares.
Okay, which I think we're getting from Mr. Smith, as soon as it's available from the county superintendent, we're getting the report, what the other districts are seeing. I am curious, a couple times there's question marks from those other districts that, so we don't know what those numbers are, but we can sort of average it, you know. So, yeah, I just don't think that we need to, Mr. Crapo, you've done an amazing job, and thank you for all this, but I would hate for you to have to keep chasing down this information that
Yeah.
we may not have to make decisions, so thank you. Okay. Any other comments? or-
No, the Miami thing is my fault, because I think in either an email conversation with Mr. Smith or with Mr. Crapo, or both of them, I suggested the Miami thing because it broke it down by age group.
Okay.
But obviously, they're having some issues with their site, so please don't feel like you have to keep chasing that down, especially if it's not working. I can look that up myself, so.
Sure. Mr. Clark, any comments?
Again, consistency, I think, is very important. So just like the stock market, you got to have that consistency over time.
Okay.
I think that's very important.
So as long as Mr. Smith is providing us with that data on a regular basis via email, is that okay for that to happen? Now, if there's a major outbreak that we need to be aware of, that the board would like to have brought up at a board meeting, that we need to get into deep, heavy discussions about, I think until that happens, we can just get the updates from him via email, and if we have questions, follow up. Is that correct from the rest of the board? Is
Yeah,
that what I'm hearing,
emails,
or-
good, very good.
Yeah, I am perfectly fine with that.
Great.
But, you know, I will still have my information.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. Okay,
Yeah, I have no problems with that.
great. Do you have a question, Mr. Smith?
Yes, I do. So just want to make sure I'm understanding. So this item will not be on the October 21 agenda. The board is satisfied with getting the Friday updates on our, the five-day window with district data, and then the weekly updates with the county data,
Right,
correct?
and if we see a major spike that we
Yeah.
need to add it,
Correct.
we're okay with adding it.
Okay.
If it's concerning numbers.
Yeah.
Is that something that everyone is okay with?
Yes.
Numbers and a clarification.
Okay.
If if a parent, brings forth something that really needs to be clarified, that
Okay.
I think everybody would benefit from, then.
That could also just be clarified with Mr. Smith making a comment.
Exactly.
superintendent comment. Okay.
Exactly, just like you did
So, yeah, we
tonight.
don't need that as an agenda item
Okay.
on our next meeting.
Okay, perfect. And the last thing I'll say is, again, I've said this before, these are great discussions. These discussions by the board help us to do our jobs every day.
Right.
And we are here, all of us are here to please the board. And so that's why if we do a presentation, we just want to make sure that we have a clear understanding, because we want to,
Right.
be at our best for the board. So great conversation, and
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would I would rather have Mr. Crapo focus his efforts on making sure that the information he's getting from the school district or each building
Yeah.
is being properly communicated and things like that. And then if we need any data, we could send Mr. Smith an email and say, hey, we're interested in getting this data, and it could be sent back in an email. And then if it's an alarming thing, then the board could say, okay, we would like this as an item for board discussion. So thank you, Mr. Crapo, we've overworked you, but thank you so much for all the information you've given us.
I will say, he needs to be relieved because the Parade of Lights is coming up soon, and he has to design a float. He's got time for that.
Okay, any more discussion on item number 1?
Mr. Birding, could I add one thought
Sure.
about substitute teachers? The state is currently working on some legislation that will waive the requirement for substitute teachers in Ohio. They're doing this in response to the sub shortage. It will waive the requirement that they have a bachelor's degree, and anyone that the board deems good to substitute in our district, regardless of that education piece, will be waived for the remainder of the year. When that happens, we'll move on that.
And so that's still under
heard that too.
discussion right now? That's
Right, they
not-
did it for part of last year, and now they're planning to try to renew that.
Okay.
And it's under discussion now.
Great,
And those are just the short term subs, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
great, okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin, I appreciate that.
I even heard, I can't remember the school, there was it was local, maybe being Southern Ohio, they were paying $200 a day plus some other incentive, and they were still struggling to get student teachers. So,
Okay, the next item on the agenda is board policies. Mr. Smith?
Yes, we have several board policies up for discussion this evening, and we have several speakers. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Martin and let him go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birdie, members of the board, we actually have 16 board policies and regulations this evening to consider. The first 4 are going to be presented by Marla Mays, our bullying and harassment officer and Title IX coordinator.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
How are you?
Good, thank
I
you.
am going to be going over the first, like you said, 4 policies. The first 2 are connected, and then 3 or 4 connected as well. The first 2 are the AC non-discrimination and ACR1, the discrimination complaint procedures. The OSBA has updated the general non-discrimination policy, which is that AC, and the accompanying regulation, the ACR1, to be in compliance with the applicable federal and state laws and regulations. As a result, both the policy and the regulation required complete rewrites. All former language has been deleted and the new wording has been added. This new wording has also been provided in your board packet as well. Also, the recommended wording of including sexual orientation and gender identity to the term sex has also been included. This was done in response to the June 15th, 2020 U.S. Supreme Court decision, Bostock versus Clayton County. Any questions in reference to those policies?
can you go into that a little bit more on the description of the gender identity piece?
Yes, the description, let me go look at the policy. So, I'm sorry, repeat that question one more time, make sure.
Just detail of what it covered, what was added to the gender identity. What are we actually stating, I guess?
If I may just insert something here, we already had this wording in our policy. We had decided some time ago, maybe a year or two, it talks about discrimination based on sex, and they've expanded that sex to include sexual orientation and gender identity.
Okay.
But that was really already in our policies, so that's not something that's changing with this. But now, we did it voluntarily. Now, because of the Supreme Court decision, we must do it.
Okay, that was before Scott. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Mays.
That,
Thank
Yes,
you, Roger.
thank you.
okay.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay. I will move on to the policy ACAA, sexual harassment, and ACAAR, the sexual harassment grievance procedures. These policies were revised last summer due to the U.S. Department of Education revisions. Therefore, there are only minor changes to this policy at this time. In policy ACAA, sexual harassment, a statement has been added indicating it is not considered retaliation if the district imposes a punishment under a zero tolerance policy that allows or always imposes the same punishment for conduct regardless of the circumstances. So that was one line that was added. And then reference policy ACAAR, wording has been added explaining that supportive measures are offered on a temporary basis, and the district has discretion and flexibility to determine which supportive measures are appropriate. Another statement was also added stating the Title IX coordinator will respect the complainant's wishes with respect to whether to file a formal complaint unless the Title IX coordinator determines it necessary to pursue the complaint in light of health and safety concerns for the district. And there are no other changes to those two policies.
Okay. Any questions from Ms. Mays? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Okay, Mr. Martin?
Thank you, Mrs. Mays. I'm going to share the next policy. It's policy BD. It's regarding school board meetings. We're adding a paragraph. The new language will permit a board member to participate in a board meeting via telephone or video conferencing or other such measures. The member can join in on the discussion, but the member joining in that capacity will not be able to vote, and their presence will not count toward the quorum of the board that evening. So that's BD, school board meetings. Any questions about that? Thank you. The next two policies, we have Mr. Perry going to share those, and he's also going to go ahead while he's sharing and share the very last policy on the list. He's doing 3 total policies.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Members of the board, the board policies that I am addressing, the first is EEA, and all 3 of these are in response to House Bill 110. Student Transportation Services. Very minor changes at the bottom of the page. And this was in response to in House Bill 110, transporting to community or non-public each day with the exception of Saturday and Sunday, regardless of the school's calendar. Actually, this doesn't change our process at all. We currently, or we have been, transporting students regardless of whether Fairfield City is in school or not. It's just, that was a clarification that needed to be added, even though it doesn't change our current processes whatsoever. EEAD, use of school, non-routine use of school buses. Again, a paragraph was added at the bottom outlining that the district is permitted to make school buses available to local government agencies to assist, and in addition to in times of emergency. Again, I will highlight that the history of this district is that we have worked with all local government agencies, and any requests or needs that we have worked with them and provided as needed. So again, even though there is language added here, I do not believe it changes our past or current processes. And then the final is policy KGC, which is smoking on district property. And the clarification within the verbiage added is just adding vaping and electronic smoking devices to the policy itself. So again, doesn't really change our past or current processes, but language that needed to be added nonetheless. Are there any questions about any of these that I could possibly answer? Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Perry? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. I will mention that the policy, the last policy he discussed, KGC, smoking on district property, that's for anyone, visitors, guests, students, anyone who comes on our property. I'm going to talk about policy GBK, which is smoking on premises by staff members, which is a more specific policy about this. If you want to know one of the reasons we have so many policy changes this board meeting and next board meeting is because of House Bill 110. That was such a wide encompassing House bill, and it's just causing us to tweak many of our policies. So this one is also in response to House Bill 110, and it just changes to include vaping and that counts as smoking on school premises by staff members. We already had it in our policy, but what we've changed in our policy is there's been a wider, more encompassing state definition of what smoking is, and we put that state definition into our policies now. So that's GBK. Any questions about that policy? Mrs. Aug has 3 to present.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. So the first policy I have is IGAE, Health Education. So this policy needed to be updated. It was last updated in 1995. And what we decided to do, since some of the language has been updated through the years, we are deleting our old policy and replacing it completely with OSBA's suggested policy. So the most recent changes make the teaching of harmful effects of electronic smoking devices and vape devices a part of the health education program. And it also adds the words organ and tissue donation to better describe anatomical gifts. So that is IGAE. The second one is that was IGAE. The second one is IGAG, Drugs, Alcohol, and Tobacco Education. And the main change to this policy is the inclusion of electronic smoking devices. So other small changes to the wording bring the policy into alignment with OSBA's sample policy. Probably noticing a bit of a theme here, aren't we?
No smoking.
And then in a completely different category here, policy IGED, Adult Diploma. We do not currently have this policy, but we would like to add it. It is suggested or recommended by OSBA that we have this policy. In the past, OSBA had a very specific policy. They are moving to a more generalized one, and it simply says that we may assist adult students regarding an adult diploma. So it doesn't lock us into having to issue one under certain circumstances, but we are here to assist in that if the occasion arises. So that concludes my policies. Any questions for me?
Any questions for Ms. Aug? I think it's interesting that policy is going to be 4 lines, but there's almost like a page of reference on it.
Great. All right, the next policy is policy JEC, and this one's based on House Bill 244. And we've added a paragraph because school districts now must permit school-age children of active duty uniformed service members who relocate to Ohio, but they're not yet district residents. They can apply for enrollment in a school district in the same manner that we allow district residents to apply. And then once they move here, they have 10 days to actually provide proof that they are residents in our district. And later on, if they move to another district in Ohio while they're living here, if we have a technology-based educational program for our students, we have to permit them to be a part of that as well. So that language has been added to policy JEC.
A question for you, Mr. Martin.
Okay.
I'm not sure I heard you correctly. You said there was a 10-day requirement. I do read here, it says DYS has 14 calendar days to send the document. Is that a different?
My understanding is that it was 10 days of.
10 school days, maybe.
10 school days.
Okay, because that would be 14
Okay.
calendar days. Okay.
Would you like me to add that wording?
No.
Okay, all right.
All right,
Yes,
thank you.
it is 10 school days.
Okay.
So you're right.
Okay.
I'm sorry, are we talking about the same set of kids there? You said military families? DYS is like juvenile incarceration.
The new language is for, the new language that we added is for service, the children of service members.
Okay.
Oh, so I apologize. I was reading something different. So under the military families, they have 10 days?
Yes.
Okay. I was reading the above thing on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh,
very
you're
much,
welcome.
Mrs.
I wanted to
Bender.
make sure I understood it right, too, and I wasn't
okay.
confusing the two.
All right. Thank you so much. I
Thank
was
you.
reading ahead.
Thank you. The next policy is JHCB. It's entitled Immunizations. Also as a result of House Bill 244, and Ohio Revised Code 3792.04, it prohibits school districts from requiring an individual to receive a vaccine for which the FDA has not granted full approval. And since that is now law and in revised code, we're adding that wording to our policy. Any questions about that? The next one is policy JHCC. It's called Communicable Diseases. This policy has also been impacted by House Bill 244. The new language states that our district will follow all state law and Ohio Department of Health regulations pertaining to immunizations and other means of controlling communicable diseases. I've noticed a trend in the OSBA that they're going to more generalized because we're seeing so many changes to our policies that their wording is becoming more generalized than in the past it was more specific. So it's just saying that we are going to follow all state and law and Ohio Department of Health educations. It repeats that we will not require individuals to receive a vaccine that doesn't have full approval by the FDA. And it also states that we will not discriminate against an individual who has not received the vaccine. The most common example of that they've talked about is, for instance, we can't require students who do not have the vaccine to wear masks and the students who do have vaccines to not have to wear masks. We can't treat them differently. So it states that we can't discriminate based on who's received the vaccine. We can't treat them differently. And then it also directs the superintendent to develop and implement communicable disease protocols in consultation with health professionals, which he does every year. We've been working very closely with healthcare professionals. Any questions about that policy? All right. The next policy, Kathy Gilbert, our Director of Special Services, was going to present, but she's unable to be here this evening, and so I'm going to fill in for her. Policy JP is Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. We usually call that PBIS, and it also deals with restraint and seclusion. This is also a total policy rewrite. Much of the same message is in there, but the wording has changed somewhat, and she gave me some highlights to share with you. The policy talks about professional development that must take place once every 3 years for each building about PBIS. And so we have a plan, the district PBIS team. We have a district-wide team. They'll provide PD to building teams, and then the building PBIS committee will provide the training to the rest of the staff. And each building has to keep a list of those trained and the date that they were trained in this. Another item she wanted to talk about, training must be provided for crisis management and de-escalation techniques. We already do this in our buildings annually. We have our own trainers, and we use a program called Crisis Prevention Intervention. And now there is a requirement that we have to report that training has been done each year by November 30th. So that's in the policy. Something new in the policy is that after there have been 3 incidents of a student being secluded or restrained, then that sets up an automatic meeting of the IEP team, and then they determine what next steps are necessary to be able to assist the student. And this isn't just for students on an IEP, this is really for any student that would need to be secluded or restrained. The new policy also talks about parents. They have to be notified annually of our policy and our procedures and how to file a complaint. That information is placed in all of our handbooks. And now, according to this policy, we have to also have that placed prominently on our website. So those are the major changes for that. And this is all as a result of changes to Administrative Code 3301-35-15. Any questions about PBIS?
Questions or comments?
As far as the professional development, If they're doing it once every 3 years, what about new hires? Are they trained immediately, or do they wait till the 3 years comes around?
That's a great question. There are, every year, the team goes through what PBIS is. They go over the rules and the regulations with the staff. So someone who isn't getting that formal training does hear about PBIS every year because they implement it during the entire year for the students. So they don't get the solid training that is required every 3 years until it comes around, but they do get other training within the building so that they have a working knowledge of PBIS.
Any other questions or comments? I just have 2 comments. First, I'm disappointed that Mrs. Gilbert couldn't be here because I honestly enjoy her presentations because I think she does a really thorough job, and she knows all of it without even looking at the paper.
Right?
She amazes me.
I will let her know that you said that.
Okay, well, you know, I'm sure she's probably going to be able to watch this because Bob does a great job of recording what we say, so. The only thing I would request is that a few years ago, we started adding the numbers spelled out
Yes.
as well. So anytime there is that, if that could be
Okay?
added.
In that,
And wherever it's spelled out, if the numeral could be added.
added, okay.
But, yeah, it's very thorough, and I'm sure she spent a lot of time doing it. And please pass on my thank you to her.
Thank you. And I will go into the program and make sure that's done.
Okay. And I think that was the last policy that we're here to
Yes,
discuss tonight?
yes.
Okay, any other questions on any of the policies we discussed? Okay, and I'm assuming we're going to have them on our next meeting coming up in 2
Yes,
weeks
for
for
approval.
approval. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.